Good morning to all my friends and family, and welcome to this episode of my Greek Orthodox Odyssey. I'm up here at Port Stephens, and for those who don't know this location, I'm over here at the base of Mount Tomaree, which is at the eastern end of Shoal Bay Beach, which extends from here all the way round to that point over there, which is known as Halifax. Where is it? Halifax Park. So in order to put things into perspective, there are a few times where I've swum the full length of this beach, entering the water over here and swimming the shoreline all the way around to the end, which took about 2 hours, and also swimming from the end there all the way back on another occasion. When I swam back from Halifax Park to over here, it was a little bit more difficult because I was swimming against the tide, believe it or not, against the current, which I didn't quite realise at the time, but it was a much harder swim, and life is much harder when you're swimming against the tide. What I'd like to do today is to dedicate this video to all the Katharinas in the world, all the Catherines, especially my firstborn daughter, Katharina, because today is the feast day of Saint Katherine, the 25th of November, 1 month before Christmas, is the day where in Greece all Katharinas, all Catherines celebrate their name day, the day that Saint Katherine died and entered heaven, I guess is the best way of putting it. Greeks or Greek Orthodox or Christians in general don't necessarily celebrate birthdays. The only 3 birthdays that are celebrated from a Christian perspective are the births of Jesus, are the births of the Virgin Mary, and the birth of St. John the Baptist. Only those 3 births are worthy of being celebrated from the church perspective. So all other Christians, all other Greek Orthodox, and this is something which is significant in Greece as well, but I guess it's changed over time with the years. But in Greece, people don't celebrate their birthdays, or never used to, should I say, but instead celebrated their name day by having family and friends coming over, cutting cakes, and having feasts and food, and enjoying it with all its glory. So what I want to do today on this great day within the Christian calendar, is to talk a little bit more about who Saint Katherine was and why she is significant within the Greek Orthodox, within the Christian calendar. I'm not saying only the Greek Orthodox, but when I say Greek Orthodox, the reason why I say Greek Orthodox is because I'm Greek Orthodox, and that's the dogma that I follow, and that's the dogma that I can comment on. I don't know what other people do, and I don't want to talk on behalf of others as well. So as we mentioned, St. Catherine's name day happens 1 month before Christmas. And we know about Saint Katherine within the Greek Orthodox Church because the Greek Orthodox Church has books called the Synodistis, Synaxaristis. Yeah, I can't quite pronounce it. As I say, I'm not a priest. But there is a book within the church that includes all the biographies of all the saints on the different days. The church year is broken down into the 365 days like a normal year would have, and each day is dedicated in some way to a different saint or groups of saints. So November the 25th is the day that is dedicated to Saint Katherine. And there's a vlog channel that I follow called Hieron Nectarios, and he's an elder, he's a monk in Greece who runs a monastery, so he's an abbot, and he runs a YouTube channel and he talks about different topics of spiritual merit. And I listen to his channel, and all of the information that I'm going to relay today is simply taking what he has said and relaying it, translating it, and interpreting it as best I can from the Greek language in the English language. And he says that there is a book within the church that is dedicated to the biographies of the saints. So what the church knows in terms of church tradition, it takes that and it uses it to then inform its parishioners, its priests on who the saint is and what they did and how significant they were, so that we too can use these people as role models. The important thing to understand is that within the Greek Orthodox Church, within Christianity, there are people that we have in our lives that we can use as role models to try and guide us in terms of how we should be living our lives, how we should be behaving, and the lessons that are learnt and taken. And within the Greek Orthodox context, as I said, we have many examples of people who are witnesses of the faith and have demonstrated the faith throughout their lives, and are those beacons of light and beacons of hope that can guide us to a better spiritual outcome and a more peaceful life. And this book that Hieron Nectarios talks about, as I said, details the lives of the saints and helps people understand a little bit better who they are. And before I go on, what I want to mention also to help put things into perspective is that all Greeks of the past, all Greek Orthodox, all Christians of the past were named and had a Christian name. I remember years ago when I was working at OTC, and there was a friend of mine living in Singapore who came and visited, and I asked him, about Singapore. Wasn't quite aware that Singapore wasn't a Christian country, and I asked him about people's Christian names, and he says you can't ask somebody who's not Christian what their Christian name is, because there are people there who are Muslims and from other religions. They don't have Christian names, which I must admit shocked me, because having lived in Australia all my life and lived and grown up in a Greek Orthodox family, I kind of expected that most people were Christian and followed the Christian traditions. And within the Greek Orthodox context, people are baptized and named after a saint or after a biblical event. So most Greek Orthodox that you'll come across are named after a saint. So for example, myself, I'm named after Saint Demetrios. My father, my late father, Panayoti, was named after the Virgin Mary, Panayoti. My mother is named after Saint Katherine. My wife, Panayota, is named after the Virgin Mary. My mother-in-law, Artemis, is named after the Saint Artemios. My auntie Frida is named after Saint Paraskevi. My uncle George, named after Saint George. My uncle Andrew, named after Saint Andrew. My auntie Anna, named after Saint Anne, Ayana. My grandmother, Gassiane, named after Saint Gassiane. So it just goes on and on. So every single person in our family is named after a saint. Or there are people such as Stavros, who's named after the Holy Cross. And there are other examples of people who are not necessarily named after saints, but after biblical events. So everybody is referenced to something to do with the church, with Jesus, with the New Testament, is where I'm coming from. So as a starting point, so the life of a Christian is centered around Christianity, is centered around the church, is centered around God, Jesus, the angels. That's another thing that I failed to mention before. There are some people like Michael, Gabriel, who are named after the archangels. And just to give you an example of the naming traditions amongst the Greek Orthodox over the years. So it's important to understand that people name their children, they baptize their children with the names of leaders of our faith, people who gave up their lives in order to follow God and to be role models that we can use today. And Saint Katherine is one of the great ones that we're going to talk about today, and we're going to honour today as well. And the other thing I want to say is that this is how things used to be, but things have changed a lot over the past couple of generations. But when I was born, my mother and father knew before I was even born what my name was going to be. When my daughters were born, the two daughters that I have were born, my wife and I knew exactly what their names were going to be even before they were born, because of the traditions and the customs that we'd been brought up with. When I was growing up, and as I say, things are not necessarily the same today, but when I was growing up, when my father was growing up, when my grandfather was growing up, you named your children after your parents. So the tradition in our part of Greece for families that were together and followed tradition, because I'm not saying that everybody followed this, but if somebody didn't follow this tradition, then you basically knew that there was a challenge or an issue in the family. But the tradition, as I understand it, was that your firstborn son was named after the husband's father. The firstborn daughter was named after the husband's mother. The secondborn son was named after the wife's father, and the second daughter was named after the wife's mother. So you knew in advance, well before children came into the world, what the name of those children was going to be. There was no innovation, there was no addition, there was no change. No, when children were born, everybody in the family knew that the firstborn was going to be named, say for example in my case, if I had a boy, the firstborn son was going to be named Panayoti, and the first daughter was going to be named Katerina. And it's a tradition that's been carried down in our family. For example, my grandfather, Petros Kalpaxis, was one of three brothers, and he had a sister. So three brothers and a sister, and they all had at least a daughter. So my papu Petro had my mother. My mother was his firstborn daughter, and her name was Katerina, who was named after my grandfather Petro's mother, Katerina. My grandfather's two brothers also had daughters, and they too had two Katerinas as well. So my mother and two of her cousins, her first cousins, were all named Katerina, but they were named Katerina all after their father's mother. So what I'm getting to is that I named my daughter Katerina, my first love, my first true love, after my first true love, which was my mother. And now that my mother's passed away, Katerina carries on her good works, carries on her name, carries on the reference to the great saint, Saint Katherine. And it's a tradition that carries on. So even though my mother's passed away and moved on, she has another servant to carry on God's work in the name of Saint Katherine. And it's really, really powerful. Really, really powerful. And as a parent, it's really, really rewarding as well for me to be able to call my daughter after my mother, who was named after her grandmother. And I don't know how far back this naming tradition goes. I don't know who the first Katerina was in our family line, but my job as a Christian is to continue that tradition and to pass that name down through the generations, so that that name never gets eliminated, never gets wiped out, never gets silenced, so that the good works that my mother did, the good works that my daughter is going to do, the good works that my mother's grandmother did, and anybody before that continued forever and a day. And it's a beautiful tradition. But sadly, as I mentioned before, it's a tradition that is slowly being wiped out through modernity, where people are now taking other names to name their children and not carrying on the tradition, and in some way just breaking the link, the beautiful long chain, the unbroken chain that has come before them, and potentially starting and hopefully starting a new chain. But it's important, it's very, very powerful to be referenced to somebody. It's very, very powerful to come into the world and to be part of a tradition, to be part of a plan, to be part of something, to know that you have a place, you have a duty, you have something important to do and to carry on. And for that reason, the Greek Orthodox Church and the Greek Orthodox people, as simple as they may have been throughout their lives, have something which is quite powerful, and it is followed in some families. I do note that it wasn't only the Greeks that would do this. I had Scottish friends who'd be named after their grandparents. I had Irish people who were named after their grandparents, and it was done across a number of different denominations and a number of different sort of cultures in the past. But these days people want to be individuals, people want their kids to be different, and I guess they're going to pay the price by having children who are dislocated from family, by not having or carrying or proudly carrying the name of their grandparents and previous people who got them to where they are today. So one more thing before we go on. I do go off on tangents, I admit, but hopefully they're good tangents that will help you understand what I'm talking about a little bit better. The other thing that is very, very important for each and every one of us is to know that we're referenced to somebody who is in heaven. Whilst we'll never know all the people who go to heaven, one thing for sure and for certain is that Jesus and his mother are in heaven, both body and soul, and all of the saints are in heaven as well. So to be named after somebody who is in heaven is in itself a great honour and a great benefit, one would imagine, because that would in some way give favour to people who are baptised, who live a Christian life, and who carry the name and hopefully live the example that they are afforded to them through the naming of a saint or of a biblical event. So I guess being named after somebody who is in heaven, because the Greek Orthodox Christians believe that the saints are one with God and are in heaven, and for that reason they have the halos. So when you see a saint in an icon, the reason why they've got halos is because they are in heaven and they are one with God and deemed to be worthy of being honoured and venerated and followed and used as an example. And hopefully they too can pray for us. Hopefully too they can intercede on our behalf and to help us and not to lead us into temptation but to deliver us from evil. So that's just an aside. So let's start to talk now after 25 minutes about who Saint Katherine was. So from the Synaxarchis, we learn that Saint Katherine, at the age of 18, was extremely beautiful. The most beautiful woman in the world. But not only was she physically beautiful, she was also academically gifted. She was gifted with multiple languages. She could read and understand and communicate in a number of languages. She was gifted in philosophy, in medicine, in poetry. So she had both the external and internal beauty in terms of knowledge and beauty. So she had the two key things that somebody would look for in order to marry and in order to admire and to hold up on a pedestal. But she was an idolater. She was also very wealthy as well. That's one more thing. So there were three great things about her. She was beautiful, she was very well educated, and her father was very wealthy. She came from a very wealthy family. She was born in Alexandria in Egypt and was very well connected socially, and somebody that everybody absolutely looked up to and admired. And just going through here, so she was highly educated, lived in a very active social life, and it was back in a time, and this surprised me actually because I wasn't quite aware of this, but she was growing up in a time where society had broken down. So this was around about 320 AD, where we're talking about, so 300 AD, 320 AD, and society back then was all about orgies and free sex. So you kind of think that the hippie age here in the world that we live in was pretty liberated, but what we're informed is that this liberation has come in waves over time, has come in waves and has hit different societies at different times. And what we're saying here is in Alexandria in 300 AD, during the years of the emperors persecuting the Christians and fighting the Christians, there were times back then when society had really lost its way. So we had Christianity taking off, but we also had emperors who were still persecuting Christians, forcing Christians underground, but also welcoming and providing a basis for a society that was unhinged, a society that was characterized by orgies and free sex. So something is a shock to me, But once again, this is what comes from the church writing, and I've got no reason to doubt this. But Saint Katherine, with all her beauty, as I mentioned, was not a Christian. She was an idolater, and lived her life, but she wasn't into the orgies and the free sex. She was a virgin, and she was holding off on finding until she found, of course, a husband. But one of her challenges, one of her problems that she had, and the problem that a lot of women have, I guess, these days, is that by being so beautiful, by being so educated, what she wanted to do was to find somebody who was her equal, or in fact better than her. So now, given that she was so beautiful, given that she was so educated, and given that she was so wealthy, was going to be tough, a tough ask, one would imagine. And she went, she asked her mother what she should do in order to find the right partner. And her mother basically advised her to go out into the desert and to speak to one of the holy men in the desert there, to discuss and to try and figure out what would be the right path for her to take. So Saint Katherine embarked on a journey and went out into the desert and came across a holy father, a person who was very, very holy, and she told him her problem. And of course the holy person could see her beauty, the holy person could see her immense wealth through her dress and the way she held herself, and he could see her education as well. She was widely educated and very, very powerful in her ability to talk and to think. And he said to her, I hear what you're saying, I understand your plight, but I do know of one person that is more beautiful, more handsome than what you are, is all-knowing, more educated than what you are, and is far greater than you are in every respect, and would make the greatest partner for you. And she was shocked, and she was elated to hear that there is somebody in the world who is not only her equal, but greater than her in all of the areas. And she was so happy to hear that, so excited, that she said to the desert father, please tell me who this man is so I can meet him. And the desert father said, the man that you're looking for is Jesus Christ. And he told her about Jesus, and he told her about Christianity, and he gave her an icon of the Virgin Mary and Jesus called the Panagia Vrefokratusa, which she took back home with her, and journeyed back home with the icon and with the knowledge that there is hope for her in this world to meet somebody who is her equal or better in every respect. So she went back home and told her mother of this meeting. And when she went back home, she took back the icon and the knowledge of Jesus, the brief knowledge of Jesus that she'd been told by the Holy Father. And she had a dream one night, and the dream was that she was in the presence of the Virgin Mary and Jesus, and Jesus was a baby in this icon Vrefo Kratusa, and Jesus had turned his back on her, so he wasn't looking at her, and she wasn't quite used to people not staring at her and not admiring her. And Jesus said to the Virgin Mary, "Who is this woman here? She is so ugly. She's so uneducated. She's so dirty. That he couldn't quite look at her." And he said to his mother that this woman is not for me. And upon that, this woman is not for me, Saint Katherine woke from her nightmare, and she was shocked that the perfect man that the Holy Father had told her about didn't find her attractive, found her dirty, and said that she is not for him. So, as you can understand, she was shocked at not being able to win Jesus over. So Saint Katherine woke in alarm, all worried that, her beauty, her education and her money didn't quite tick all the boxes for Jesus, the perfect man, the man that she wanted to marry. So she told her mum, and her mum told her to go back to the holy man to get him to help her interpret the dream that she'd had. So she went back and found the holy man and told her the dream. And the holy man told her what that dream meant was that she needed to make some adjustments. She needed to make a few adjustments to her life in order to change and to be worthy of being one with God. So he baptized her in the Father, the Son and the Holy Spirit, and he catechized her and taught her all about Jesus and all about the Bible. And what happened was that she had a dream again, and this time round, Jesus and the Virgin Mary again presented themselves in the dream, and this time Jesus looked at her, now that she'd been baptized and catechized, and said to his mother, now he will accept her as his bride. And she mystically was given a ring. I wasn't quite aware of this, so this is quite interesting and new. And what I'll try and do now is I'll look into the icons that I see of Saint Katherine and see if she's wearing a ring. But according to the biography of Saint Katherine, she was given a ring, and that ring symbolized the betrothal to Jesus, which ontologically meant that she was now considered to be one with Jesus. And within the Orthodox faith, there is a thing called theosis, where one reaches a pinnacle where they can become one with God. It happens through the sacraments, through Holy Communion, but also when you get to the point where you live, breathe and serve as a dedicated servant of God, then and only then you become one with God. And I was interested to find out that all of the monaches, all of the monks and the nuns, more specifically the nuns, when they become nuns, they do, or they are considered to be brides of Jesus, and they become united with Jesus as one. They become the brides of Jesus. So what happened back then is once this happened, the news got around. She would be preaching the word of God to people, and the ruler back then was Maximinus in 311 to 315 AD, or around about that time. And he made a decree back then for all people to renounce Jesus and to become idolaters. And if anybody did not follow the decree of the emperor, that they would be put to death and punished, and their families punished as well. So Saint Katherine, in all her bravery, from what this biography says, presented herself to the emperor and denounced him and said to him that what he was doing was wrong and unchristian, and he of course was angered by her position, and he said to her that she needs to renounce her Christianity, or else he was going to torture her and kill her. And she offered to the emperor an opportunity to bring his greatest philosophers, his greatest people, his most educated people to her, so that she could have a debate with them and for them to convert her. And what happened was that 150, it could have been 50, could have been 100, could have been 150, but the biography says that the emperor amassed 150 of his greatest thinkers, of his greatest philosophers in the kingdom, and he brought them to Saint Katherine to debate her and to convert her to idolatry, and to get her and to encourage her and to teach her so that she would renounce Jesus. And what happened was that Saint Katherine was visited by, I think, Saint Michael, who emboldened her and told her to stick to her guns, to stick to her faith, and to debate all of the philosophers, and that God would be on her side. And what Saint Katherine did was that she took on the 150 greatest and smartest men in the land, and not only did she beat them in terms of her debate, she also converted them to Christianity, to which those 150 were immediately put to death. And she converted back then many people to Christianity during these debates, which of course infuriated the emperor. and he once again encouraged her to renounce her faith. Otherwise, he would organise for her to be tortured and killed, but she resisted. And what happened, I guess, after that was that she persisted in her position, and she was tortured over months, and she wouldn't break, she wouldn't change her ways. And one day they created a piece of equipment called the Katherine wheel, which was a mechanical device that caused torture but also ripped the body to shreds and caused immense pain, breaking bones, ripping flesh, stretching the body. And whilst they were torturing Saint Katherine, this Katherine wheel, this mechanical device, was somehow broken apart, and the Katherine wheel started rolling and killing people along the path, people who had come to enjoy watching Saint Katherine being persecuted and tortured were killed along the way. So there was a number of soldiers who witnessed this, who came to the faith. One of the generals, and I think 200 soldiers or so, who also were killed, were beheaded. And it finishes up by Saint Katherine being killed as well